this is one training that you are being asked to do for the American Love Project. After you do this training, please go to the AmericanLoveProject.org, and we'll have that on our last slide, because that is where the materials will be for you to download all the resources for the lesson. That will be on the last slide. So we are 29 pieces. This is one of our vision statements. Every beautiful heart deserves to be educated. We're trying to move our wisdom from our minds to our hearts. This is our mission statement. I don't know why it did that. 29 pieces uses art to awaken, uplift, and give voice to the creative human spirit to make genuine, positive social change. So tonight we're introducing you to the Love Project, the American Love Project. So what happens when artists across America combine lessons of love and mutual respect with powerful visuals and words to create and share art? That's what you're about to find out. So the objectives, and this is for you teachers, you don't need to show this to your kids, obviously, to learn a little bit of the history of the Dallas and Grand Prairie Love Projects, to understand the meanings of the word love, to appreciate and possibly interweave the history of your community into the lesson, to feel compassion and empathy about the issues we face in today's world, to get inspired about the power of art to ignite positive social change, to share the American Love Project lesson, and to create art that will be displayed on the American Love Project online gallery in your community and in Washington, D.C. in early 2022. So for a little bit of background, 8 years ago, 29 Pieces did the Dallas Love Project, and it was conceived as a response to the moniker of Dallas being called a city of hate. It was the 50th anniversary of the assassination of President Kennedy. There were going to be a lot of events and a lot of press in Dallas. We didn't like the name City of Hate, so 29 Pieces approached community partners about working with us to have this crazy big goal, and people here on this call, Vicki Milliken and Barbara Miller, were involved in this project deeply. And we accomplished our goal of creating 10,000 pieces of art about love. Approximately 20,000 artists participated, and we exhibited the art in 67 exhibit venues along what had been President Kennedy's motorcade route. And it started at Love Field, and the exhibits ended at Parkland Hospital, where President Kennedy passed away. We got incredible media attention from this, something like 185 million media impressions from around the world, including the Wall Street Journal, the BBC, Al Jazeera, South American networks, Danish networks, you name it. We also did a dedicated website with an online gallery of the art from the Dallas Love Project. We will be doing this again for the American Love Project. That gallery will start on September 21st, this coming September 21st, which is the International Day of Peace. So Judy here, Judy took the baton, and having a little trouble here. Judy took the baton and brought the Love Project to Grand Prairie with great success, and did it with the entire district in Grand Prairie, and did exhibits all over the city. Midland, Odessa, and Lubbock, Texas also did the Love Project.
And at the end of the slides, we're not going to go through it today, but there's an addendum, and there's quite a few slides about Grand Prairie ISD and a grant we wrote to get the funding, and just some more slides of where we had shows and stuff. So when you have time to go through the addendum, you can take a look at that.
Thanks, Judy. So the Love Project, the American Love Project, is built on 4 pillars. It's the number one is the idea that love has the power to repair and heal the divides that separate us and keep us from working together to solve urgent problems in our country. Number 2, these beautiful ideals that are contained in the founding documents and laws of our country that challenge us to create a more just country for all of us. And 3rd is the power of art to awaken and educate hearts, to uplift our voices, make positive social change. Number 4, we have this additional element in the Love Project that we ask people to incorporate quotes about love from great philosophers, visionaries, artists, musicians, poets, peacemakers. And the reason for that is that this brings to our presence and our consciousness the words of people who really understood the power of love. So the first pillar is love. We lead with love in this project. We always lead with love. Love repairs and heals. So what does it mean to you to love? And these are some questions as we go along. We're not going to have time for open discussion, which I would love to do. But if you would like to answer any of these questions in the chat, I'd love to see what you say. What does it mean to you, love? So, and all of the pieces you're seeing are either from the Dallas Love Project or from the Grand Prairie Love Project. I love this piece, this little stick figure. I carry your heart. I carry your heart, from E. Cummings. The dictionary meaning of love is a feeling of warm personal attachment, deep affection for someone or something. It's a virtue representing all of human kindness, compassion, and affection. But ancient cultures had a number of ways to describe different kinds of love. So here are just three from the Greeks. The Greeks use the word agape to mean unconditional love for one another. It's to will good for others. Eros is intimate or romantic love. Philia is friendship, usually between equals.
David, thanks for having me back. This is the most contagious film.
Okay. For the American Love Project, we're gonna focus our art project on agape, this bigger kind of love. I love this piece too, with the big colorful wings. Where there's great love, there are always miracles. My husband did this one. I'm proud of this one. So we're going to use quotes about this bigger love from great artists, peacemakers, musicians, writers, and we ask you to use one of their quotes for the subject of your art. We provide you with about 7 pages of beautiful quotes from all different kinds of people, all Americans, and we have them in English and in Spanish. But I love this one of Kelly's. That was particularly for Dallas, obviously. And we're going to learn how letters can be decorated and how letters themselves can be artistic elements in your art. And then we're going to ask you to create your message of love. So the second pillar is about the ideals stated, the ideals that are stated in our founding documents and in our laws. So the ideals in the Declaration of Independence and the preamble to the U.S. Constitution spoke into being the dream of a nation based on equality and justice. So here's some words from the Declaration. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And from the preamble to the Constitution, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the USA. So one thing I'd like to interject here is that we do not have a political agenda here. We are asking questions, we are stating some facts, and we are encouraging participation from people from both sides of the aisle, because we feel like this art making is a point of entry into what could hopefully be some effective dialogue. So just a question, have we achieved these ideals in our country? I'd be curious for you to put these in your responses in the chat. Have we achieved the ideals? And many of us saw Amanda Gorman, the youth poet laureate, speak at the inauguration of President Biden and Kamala Harris. This is just one bit from her poem. It's because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. So we asked our teacher advisory board about what difficult issues impact our nation and what are the issues that are on the minds of the kids and would benefit by our love and efforts to work together to repair them. So we just have a bit of a sampling. The first one that came up was feeling safe in school. I'm going to add one thing that came up in in a prototype session at Judy's with Judy's art teachers recently, is that the teachers mentioned the one thing that's on the kids' mind is being accepted by their peers and by not being afraid of bullies. So the environment, kids are worried about the environment. There are the issues of bias, prejudice, and racism, immigration policies, American Indian nations, tribal sovereignty, gender issues. There's still a gap between what men and women earn. The really sad statistic that 1.5 million students in the USA are homeless. This has gone up 16% in just the last 4 years. And there are undeniable racial disparities in healthcare that create inequitable access to care. So here's a section. Judy's going to take over for a moment and talk to you about this.
So this is a section where you can, let me find the button here, make this personal to your community. So we tailored this to Grand Prairie and put in a few slides about the history of Grand Prairie. It's between Dallas and Fort Worth. So feel free to edit this to, take these slides out and put something in about your community. The students love seeing these pictures of the two big high schools and what they looked like in 1951 and so forth. This is a famous photo from Main Street because John F. Kennedy campaigned here in 1960, and the kids love seeing all these photos of the stores that aren't there anymore, but some of the neon still is. But this is a way to also talk about what issues are in your community, and what is your what's your community known for, or maybe some famous people. And some of the issues maybe have been resolved, and then some of them might be new. I mean, we may still have things from the past that we're still concerned about, like we just talked about, but we have some new ones too. So feel free to edit these and make this part of the program something that your kids can, really feel connected to about their community.
Yeah, and I think this is your opportunity to meet your kids where you're at, meet your audience where they're at. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So democracy is fragile, and we're at a very divisive point in the country where there's so many of us are traumatized by the COVID-19 pandemic. We witnessed a violent event on January 6th at our nation's capital, which illustrated just how divided we are. People sought to disrupt the democratic transfer of power in the country. So we ask, there are many people who are willing to peacefully take a stand to ask America to live up to the ideals as promised in the Declaration, the Constitution, and US laws. I'm going to ask you to put any of your ideas in the chat. How can people peacefully, positively take a stand to work to make America to live up to our ideals? So here's some ideas we came up with. Just vote. Encourage everybody to vote. Teachers, in my mind, teachers are the big influencers. Teachers are portals. Teachers are portals to showing young people the way to see things in a new way, to see the world in a bigger way. Human rights attorney, peace activist, something like Doctors Without Borders, service organizations, faith-based organizations, environmental activism. There are peaceful demonstrations. Then we could come into the third pillar, the power of art to repair and heal. And for this project, for the American Love Project, art is our strategy to open and heal hearts, express and give love, and challenge our country to live up to its ideals. So we asked the question, I'm going to ask you all now too, if you'd like to put something in the chat. How can we as artists work together to build a nation that shows more love? And I've kind of adopted this bit from Frederick Douglass as almost a mission statement. So Frederick Douglass, I wasn't aware of his lecture on pictures until several months ago. He delivered it in 1861. But he says poets, prophets, and reformers are all picture makers. And this ability is the secret of their power and of their achievements. They see what ought to be by the reflection of what is and endeavor to remove the contradiction. So that in his words states what we're doing here. We're creating pictures that really give us a vision of what we can work toward. So Judy's going to tell you about some really amazing artists who inspire us by using art to bring attention to social justice issues.
So we're going to talk first about Ai Weiwei. He's the Chinese multimedia artist and political activist, and his work is so amazing. And we love this quote. It is an artist's duty to be a part of the social change and to create works that respond to the change. So these are examples of how you can show your students, or who, and by the way, you may be a social studies teacher, or you might be doing this with your book group or whatever group you're working with. But these are examples that you can show how artists have always been at the forefront of social change. This is Joan Quick-Dissy Smith and her 1992 mixed media painting about, it's called Trade, Gifts for Trading Land with White People. She's developed this amazing kind of artistic language using appropriated imagery and signage and commercial images with her own personal narratives to, you know, in her own native worldview, to talk about American Indian identity, histories of oppression, and environmental issues. This is also a great way to introduce students to the idea of irony and also symbolism, and to, you know, explore these mascot symbols and the stuff that's hanging on the clothesline. Elizabeth Catlett, the African-American artist who adopted Mexico, she's best known for her depictions of the African-American experience in 20th century, giving especially dignity and strength to Black women and men too. And she also really pushed the line of what is acceptable subject matter in the art world. Kerry James Marshall from Chicago, he explores issues of identity in African-American history in his paintings. He creates these huge narrative paintings. The one on the right is called Bang, and it depicts a suburban neighborhood with the typical July 4th celebration, the flag and the you know, Pledge of Allegiance and the Weber grill and all of that. And you can kind of see in the pink clouds at the bottom, it says Happy July 4th. He's really trying to ask about, you know, this mythology about American patriotism. And he wants to remind us that perhaps not all Americans were created equal. He's another great artist to talk about symbolism. For example, all the people in his paintings have very, very dark skin, and he writes beautifully about that, eloquently about that choice of color. Corita, she was also known as Corita Kent. She was an artist, activist, educator, advocate for social justice, and she used a lot of pop art imagery, poetry, cultural quotes to create messages of hope. Her work, you can find her website easily. Her work is great to introduce students to using handwriting. And Karen's going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, about using handwriting, words and images. But she did a lot of her work in screen printing and did beautiful lettering. Shepard Fairey, We the People. This was a poster created that highlighted diverse women, and this was created for the 2017 inauguration. And you might remember that we had the Women's March at that time too. So he's making this statement beautifully about we the people. Yolanda Lopez, Portrait of the Artist as the Virgen of Guadalupe. She also was exploring in these pieces, these early pieces of hers, what is acceptable subject matter, and especially for women of the Chicanx culture and society at large. Guerrilla Girls are an art collective of anonymous feminist women artists, and they're still active, and they wear gorilla masks in public, and they use all sorts of data, statistics, for example, like how many women are in art museums, or how many women artists are mentioned in the standard art history textbooks. But they're using humor to really bring home some very serious things to discuss. These would be great to discuss with your students too. They call themselves the conscience of the art world. So now
Okay.
Karen's going to talk about, let's get started.
All right. So I'm going to make the point now, and I'm going to make it again, is that everybody is welcome to do this project. We are reaching out to educators, to students, to artists, non-artists, all ages of people, public schools, private schools. Everybody is welcome to do the project. So, so please share this with your colleagues and friends too. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to take a couple seconds. Would you put in the chat, how have you used the word love in the last few days? Might have been about something you had to eat. It might have been about some piece of clothing you bought. It might be something more substantial and deep. You talk to your children or your husband or your parents.
I love my air conditioner in my car.
Yay. Yes, we do. Okay.
In Texas.
Okay. For the American Love Project, we're talking about this agape kind of love. And just as a reminder, that's the big love, where we feel an unconditional love for everybody, everything, all of creation, all of God's earth. So what are some emotions we feel when we have love in our heart? And I would ask the opposite, like, how does it feel? When we did this workshop with Judy's prototype group the other day, a little girl had a great answer, and I asked, what's the opposite of how you feel when you don't have love in your heart? And she said, terrible. And then what are ways that you can show love? So, and those are great questions to have with your classes, or to ask yourself as you're doing this too. My hope in doing this project is, somebody asked me, well, what do you want people to do after they do this? Where do you want them to go with it? And my answer was, I want them to go home. I want them to go home and try to show more love in their home, first of all, and then take it out into the world. So this bigger love is more than just what we sense with our eyes or tummy. We're talking about the love we feel in our hearts and want to share with others. And I love this is an elementary school kid who did this. Love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend, from Martin Luther King Jr. So this big love might be for our pets. This is my kitty, Peanut. Obviously, it can be for our parents, our siblings, our friends. And it might be for the world around us, this great, big, beautiful world, the oceans, the sky, the earth, the trees, the critters, the environment, our country. And then the fourth part of this project is these words about this greater love that have stood the test of time. And we're asking you to use a quote in your art from the list that we're providing you. That doesn't mean you can't find your own quote if there's another quote, but we ask that the quote be about this bigger kind of love, and a quote that has stood the test of time. So here's just a few that we use as examples. Van Gogh, he's recognized as one of the greatest artists of all time. This beautiful quote. And this one, I'm curious if anybody would write what you think this means. The more I think it over, the more I feel that there's nothing more truly artistic than to love people. I know what he's saying, um, but I'm curious what y'all think. I think that every time, from my perspective, every time we have a disagreement with a person or feel hurt by something that someone has said, we have a chance to be creative, to slow down, pull back a little bit, get a little bit creative about our response, and think about forgiveness even. So Alicia Keys, um, living musician, American singer, songwriter, record producer, pianist, actress. It's a beautiful quote. Love will come find you just to remind you of who you are. And Gandhi, he was a peaceful leader who used nonviolence to lead the people of India to independence. He said, where there is love, there is life. So here's where the little girl said, it's terrible. What happens in life when there isn't love? She said, it's terrible. And I didn't have any better answer than that, really.
Right.
And this piece of art is the piece that was done by a student from Irma Rangel, Young Women's Leadership School. Maya Angelou, internationally known poet, writer, and civil rights activist. Love recognizes no barriers. It jumps hurdles, leaps fences, penetrates walls to arrive at its destination full of hope. So, what do you think that means, too? That we arrive at the destination still full of hope. That's deep love. So, so these quotes have power. They have an energetic power, and I think that a good portion of the reason of the success of the Dallas Love Project was because of these quotes. These quotes just energetically lift us. And when we're surrounded by quotes from people who understand love, it changes us, it opens our consciousness. So they uplift us with their positive power. So we will provide you with a list of quotes, and they're on the AmericanLoveProject.org website for you to download. And we have to stress this, the art is square, always square, on a square format. And there are reasons for this. It has to do with how we're going to display it, how we're going to use it. So this beautiful piece is in the permanent collection of the 6th Floor Museum. So plan a color combination that expresses your feeling. The letters in your art are part of the art form. So let's look at some ways that the letter forms can be expressive. So this is beautiful. I think it's a colored pencil drawing, if I remember right. It was just a gem. But you can see how this young artist, this is a high school artist, how this young artist did every letter differently. I mean, there's stylistic similarity, but they're all handled with thought. So as you decorate your letters, you can decorate them with animal, plant, abstract forms, as these images from illuminated manuscripts show. You can do the ransom note kind of type, where you cut letters out of magazines. This is done by a professional artist. Again, I carry your heart, I carry it in my heart, from E.E. Cummings. Beautiful piece. And you can make up your own cut paper alphabet. These are so super simple to do, to just cut out letters from construction paper or from your pattern papers. You can do decorated letters with simple art supplies, ink, colored pencils, markers. We really encourage using the art supplies you have around you. Don't spend a bunch of money on the supplies. You can do cool stuff with what you can find in your house. And if you like to work digitally, great. That'll be great, because then you can upload your art as a high-res file, and it will be ready for our online gallery. Obviously, you can do it in Photoshop or InDesign or Illustrator, but there are also free illustration apps that I'm not too familiar with, but Judy mentioned this one, Tayusi Sketches.
Yeah, the Sketches app is fantastic for even, you know, our elementary students work with sketches, and elementary through high school. It's really cool.
Okay, cool.
Karen, I got a question here in the chat. Is there a preferred size of the square?
No, no. The art can be anywhere, anything you want, really, from 6, and I'm just throwing out numbers, 6 by 6, 8 by 8. For the Dallas Love Project, we did all 18 by 18. But because we are not asking for the physical art, we are going to ask people to take a photograph of your art and send it to us, submit it through our website. So any size square will be fine. Now, that being said, you might, if you're going to do this in your organization, your school, with your class, you might want to do a uniform size so that it makes it easier to do an exhibit in your school. And we'll get to where this is all leading. So the step one is to select a quote about love from the quotes that we give you. Your art should be square. Do some sketches in pencil to figure out how you're going to incorporate the quote. And I would really encourage everybody to make the text big, and I'll tell you why in a moment. We want it to be big enough that it can be read from a distance. So step 2 is to choose your square background and your paper and your materials. Design your message of love with a decorated quote about love on it, and it helps to plan how you're going to use the letters. Then make your art. And then when finished, if you're in a classroom, take the time to share your art with your group or your class. And we very much suggest that from the beginning, you set up some ground rules for this discussion, because we know that kids can become, just make fun of each other. So we ask you to set up ground rules for respectful listening and letting everybody just have their time to talk about what they've done and the choices that they've made, so that they feel that they're in a safe space. Then step 4, here's what we're going to put you folks. If you'll go to the AmericanLoveProject.org and sign up for our newsletter and register, and once you've registered on that website, you can download our PowerPoint that you're looking at. You can download the quotes about love. We also have some other materials, like a list of art supplies, a menu of what you could do in your community. So the project timeline is that if you'd like professional development credit, which you're doing that now, you can register for these free online trainings. You can also tell people that we have a webinar. We're going to have this recorded webinar on YouTube, so people who don't want to or don't need professional development credits can go to YouTube, and that link will be on our website to watch this training. So we ask that you do the project with the students or yourself first thing in autumn 2021. Now, the reason for that is that we have a big idea for a project in Washington, D.C. The earlier that we get your art submissions onto our website, the more likely you and your students' art will be considered for this exhibit. The online gallery opens on September 21st. We will continue to accept online submissions really on through the whole autumn and into winter. We're going to provide you with a menu of how you can be involved. This would include being on our online gallery, which will be debuting on the International Day of Peace. And we're asking people to do exhibits in your school and your community in early January of next year. And the big goal, we're working with Frontrunner Productions in Washington, D.C. to do a very ambitious installation of you can see portals in the background here. They're not going to look like that, but they're going to be 57 portals representing the 50 states and the 7 territories, a 12-foot tall accordion fold book, and a 12-foot tall gallery in front of the Smithsonian Castle and the Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C. on the National Mall. And we're aiming for this to open on January 6th of 2022 and be up until Valentine's Day of next year. We also would like to have exhibits all across the land of love art, so that all across the land there's this wave of love. We lead with love, and that there be art about love, dialogue about love all across the country. So it's about our nation's founding ideals, plus the power of art, plus words that inspire love, plus the creativity of thousands and thousands of educators, students, organizations, artists, aiming for American healing. Um, One thing I want to mention before I turn this over to Judy to talk about the addendum stuff we have is that um, I hope to work with actually some of the people on this call to develop some extension activities after this lesson happens, because we are getting that question. Okay, we do the lesson. What, other than asking people to go home and act more loving to each other, what more can we do in the classroom to extend this lesson? So we're working on that, and some of the things in the addendum we'll talk to you about that. So Judy, I think we're at the, so thank you for participating. And Judy's going to talk about some supplements that we have here.
I love that. Hope has many beginnings. And, you know, after this year that everybody's had, and hopefully you'll see your students in person again, there'll be a lot of new beginnings. These 4 supplements, we're not going to spend time on them right now because we want to allow enough time for questions, but there is a beautiful series of social emotional learning slides, a slide about the Native American land acknowledgement, which I'll talk about in a second, additional social justice artist, and by the way, the and the Grand Prairie Love Project, so you can see some examples. And another thing about the social justice artists is they're all American artists. And so that is we felt like a really important thing to have a beginning to talk with students or your book group or your social studies class, whoever you're working with, to see what American artists are doing from their communities and how to make change there. So there's a wonderful series here, and several of the teachers I've spoken with are going to use these as entry points over the course of several days. I know with elementary, you don't see your students as often, but you know, to build this safe place in the classroom where you can really talk with your students and kind of lay the groundwork for them to explore some of the issues in this project. But we found these to be great slides for, you know, even adults who it's great to be reminded of things that we can do. Also, we want to give you some resources if you want to do a Native American land acknowledgement for your community. This from the National Museum of the American Indian, they have a great resource. And also about the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and how they influenced the creation of the United States Constitution. And then the link at the bottom from the government is a copy of a resolution where they were honoring the influence of the Haudenosaunee, their democratic principles that George Washington and Ben Franklin used, those principles and guidance. So feel free to look at that. And then here's some other artists. And then the Grand Prairie Project. We chose to use art that was 6 by 6, 12 by 12, and 18 by 18, so that when the art fit together, it all, when we had exhibitions, the art all fit together. And that's the end of our slides.
We're asking all of our friends to share the word, to ask their friends to share the word. We want this to be open, like I said, to everybody across the aisle. We are not approaching this with this agenda or that agenda. It's to open up a dialogue to try to make some steps to A, have more love in this world, and B, to have safe dialogues about how can we come together to solve some urgent issues.